Great. Hi. Thank you all very much for joining us today for our Roy Talks. Apologies for all of the technical difficulties that I had at the beginning. I'm on my phone, but we're recording this session, so I don't have all the bells and whistles that I would have on my laptop. The conversation is going to be just that. Some dialogue between our artists about what they're doing and what's next for them. I have some questions to guide us, but you are welcome to also ask some questions. Post those in the chat and we'll catch up with those. We're also encouraging the artists to ask questions of each other. It really is a conversation just amongst us all. And so without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. I want to welcome everyone to our Roy Talks for February and begin by thanking our sponsors who make conversations like this, and in fact, Roy G. Biv Gallery for Emerging Artists possible. The Ohio Arts Council, the Greater Columbus Arts Council, the Columbus Foundation, without whose appreciation and advocacy for emerging artists, Roy would not be able to enter its 33rd year of producing exhibitions in our space. So we are recording today's conversation, and what I'd like to do is just, I think, begin with some brief introductions, if you wouldn't mind. Morgan is here with me, and so I'm going to make sure to mute myself after I'm done talking, and that way we're not going to reduce the amount of the echo back and forth here. And so Morgan, if you wouldn't mind starting things off and just introduce yourself.
Hi. Sorry, I gotta unmute myself. Hello, my name is Morgan Rose Free. I'm a Canadian artist currently based in Columbus. And I am in this show with Padyn and Phoenix. I don't know what else to say right now. I guess I'll let the other artists introduce themselves and I can get more into my work a little bit later.
Go Phoenix.
Hi, my name is Phoenix Brown. I'm based in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I'm originally from Cincinnati, Ohio. So I'm a native to Ohio, but I just migrated north for school and I just kind of stayed ever since. And I do I'm very interdisciplinary. I do a lot of painting, printmaking, drawing, and sometimes video. I'm getting into like typewriters and like 8mm film photography, not photography, videography. So I don't know, I'm all over the place.
I'm Padyn Humble. I'm originally from Montana. I primarily do sculpture and installation. There's a little bit of painting, a little bit of drawing in there. And I'm currently based in Illinois and I'm working on my thesis work. And so some of the work up in the show is part of my thesis work, and I found ways to get it to work into more organized themes. So that's me.
Thank you. I think I'd like to just start things off with talking a little bit about each of you and your work. Roy's a juried space, and so artists apply to exhibit here. We convene a jury to review those applications, and then we put together a curatorial team to put artists' work together. And so I know that Padyn, you and Morgan are exhibiting together, though you don't actually collaborate on the work that you have. But then our curatorial team saw some similarities between your works and also Phoenix's work, and so put all of you together. And so I wonder, Morgan and Padyn, if you just couldn't talk a little bit about how it is that you started to exhibit your work together. We do have at Roy a blog on our website that goes into a little bit more detail with some of these questions, and also in our Roy zine. But for the audience, let's just get a little context. So if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit about that process.
Yeah. So Morgan and I first met when we were living in Pittsburgh doing Bunker Project residency. And at the time, I think we both kind of just noticed that some of the social and cultural constructs and the way that we analyze objects and images and put them into our work were very similar. And I think we kind of analyze our surroundings very similar as well. And so since then, we've just been, I think, thought collaborators a lot, idea collaborators together. We share our writing. and our work with each other first and foremost, kind of before everybody else, because we give each other very honest feedback, which I think is really necessary. And so we've just been building off of that relationship for a while and been meaning to get our work into the same space for quite some time. And so this was a good opportunity to do so. And I think this is kind of the first time that our bodies of work are aligning as well as they are. I think the visuals in this show have a lot of overlap that some of our previous bodies of work didn't. So I think it was just good timing.
Yeah, Peyton, that was super well said. Yeah, I think the thing that's special about our working relationship is that we can float ideas to each other and not worry about, our pride or being nice to each other. It's really about just good, honest feedback. So it's really helpful when we're starting new work, or sometimes I call Peyton my color specialist because he's very good with color, and I'll be like, does this work? And so we work together in that capacity a lot, even though we've never lived in the same place since Pittsburgh. And so, being able to play with our works and figure out how to have them work together in a space was a really, really fun experience together. Yeah.
Have you applied to other spaces to show your work together, or are you working on something for an upcoming exhibition?
No.
Well, leading up to Roy, we applied to quite a few other places. But I would imagine now, getting our work in the same space, we'd be open to doing more collaborative exhibitions together, because I think it worked out really well. So, but yeah, no, Roy was the first one to bite off of this proposal. So
yeah, I think right now we haven't even talked about next steps. But I think we will continue to work together in all kinds of capacities, and hopefully, show together more in the future. But yeah, we haven't started putting together any new materials yet.
What were some of the things that you saw in your own work to Peyton and Morgan that then you saw also maybe some similarities or some relationship with Phoenix's work? And then tail ending on your response to that, Phoenix, if you'll talk a little bit about what you saw coming into the space with your work and Morgan and Peyton's work.
yeah, I can kick that off. I think Morgan and I are both interested in symbolic imagery. We start from kind of icons and symbols in that way, first and foremost. And so Morgan's work, a lot of her portals, as people call them, are recognizable imagery, and then she fills the images with landscapes or with textures or pattern. And I think that use of pattern mixed with symbols and having some recognizability, that's not a word, but I think that's kind of where we both start. Is we're very symbol and object based, and so like my work, the one in the back with the bow and her rear mirror piece, and I've got cowboy hats and all these things that like the audience can look at it and recognize it right away, and then the amount of manipulation and kind of imagery and patterns that goes into it allows for a little bit of space for interpretation. So I think that's where her and I bounce off of each other most.
Yeah, and then I think working with Phoenix, when we were installing, the three of us were in here, I don't know, like 5 or 6 hours probably installing together. And it was really, really fun to play with the space, look at relationships like this painting of Phoenix's and how it has that like rounded bottom and it's kind of tucked in this lovely nook. And then we have our two pieces, Peyton's floor piece and my wall piece, that kind of mimics that shape. We also had a lot of other moments where Phoenix has like a grid happening or different, repeated kind of colors or patterns that as we were installing, we were seeing how different things had relationships and could play off of each other while still kind of giving all of our work, its own space. So yeah, it was really fun figuring out how everything would work. And I think it worked out really well.
I think color is also really important to all of us. And I recognize
Absolutely.
that Phoenix's work. Is Phoenix's use of color is really bold and really graphic, and I think also very purposeful. And so I think that purpose and kind of overlap of the way that we all use color is what helped tie this body of work together. So.
Yeah, and Phoenix, if you want to have me walk around to any specific pieces while you're talking, let me know. That's why I came in here.
Oh, okay, cool, sick, thank you.
No worries.
Yeah, I think a lot of the similarities that Peyton and Morgan already brought up were with the same things that I saw when we were all installing in the space. I was just mostly looking at the amount of flat color we all use collectively. Although Peyton does have some really nice like coloration in his like sculpture, especially the one in the back corner with like the charger. That one, I love that. I love that piece. But I was really paying attention to the way we all used color similarly and use like kind of like blocking. We don't really, at least me and Morgan, don't use a lot of blending. We kind of tend to like block color, which agrees very well with one another. And again, was just like the shape of the bottom of the paintings and the grids, and also just some sort of, or just a little bit of like natural landscapes. There are references to their exhibition with like nature, like rain and such, and fire, whereas my work also has like a little bit of fire, specifically the piece that Morgan is like looking at right now. That piece also has fire and like some grass and things. So I think our work has like a lot of references to nature. I think that was like a underlying theme that kind of came out on its own. I don't know if y'all would agree with that.
I would agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that definitely ties the work together as well. And then having this painting specifically kind of come back and join more of where we've placed our work it's had a little bit more of a material overlap as well. Cause I think this is your only piece, Phoenix, that incorporates like a different kind of material. And because we have fiber happening, and yeah, some different found elements. It really kind of ties everything together nicely too. So that was fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are you okay to answer questions as they're being asked in the chat? We have a question about how you do what you do, why you do what you do, what's the why, your use of color and that sort of thing. So if you could maybe tailor your next answer to that question.
Yeah.
Oh, all of us, yeah.
No, you go, Phoenix.
Oh, it's okay. You already started.
Okay. I was going to maybe tailor this question to the way that Morgan and I created our statement, maybe a little bit, in terms of like the title of our show and maybe why we decided to do what we did. The title, A Dove is Just a White Pigeon. I think ultimately we both are interested in perspective and kind of how things can be viewed from multiple standpoints and kind of what environment did they come from first, but then how do we recontextualize them and find new ways to repurpose or bring meaning to them informed by other environments or by other rationalities. And so, I mean, a dove is just a white pigeon is all in the way that you decide to view what you're looking at. And I think, Morgan, can you help me out with this a little bit?
Yeah, I think, just thinking about the phrase, a dove is just a white pigeon, literally, that is true. That we think about doves as symbolizing peace and freedom and all these things. And we think of pigeons as like flying street rats. And really they're the same kind of bird. It's just the color that changes for us. In the way that we've culturally come to understand them. And so I think that the phrase plays well with the fact that, yeah, like Peyton said, we're both kind of playing off of things that exist within our culture and just like kind of shimmying them a little bit to do something else. Yeah, I think specifically for me, the nature elements for me is a lot of my work. My whole practice is kind of just dealing with my own climate anxiety, sort of, and trying to kind of create spaces that are either like an idealistic version of nature, kind of trying to create an escape through this portal, or confronting it like with something like this, which is, looking through these beautiful curtains to the world be on fire. So kind of approaching, climate anxiety in different ways, but using really recognizable imagery. And then Padyn, you've been dealing with more, you talk about that.
Yeah, so just to continue a little bit about our statement, and then I'll get into mine. I think that like level of duality and where you decide to look at it as a pigeon or look at it as a dove, what kind of grace are you willing to get closer or detract yourself away from what we're presenting you? I think if you decide to view it as the dirty pigeon or the beautiful symbolic dove, how much are you willing to indulge in the work or indulge in kind of the themes that are being presented? And I think where Morgan is dealing with her climate dread and also just some digital anxiety, I deal a lot with cowboy masculinity. And right now my work is being narratively informed by old country music. And so I use old country music as allegory for a queer experience, for like particularly rural queer experience, where it's all about longing and desire. And there's a lot of pageantry in the way that the vulnerability is expressed. And I think it's a very staged, at least literary and like lyrically staged, not quite visibly, but I think it's all staged very dramatically in a way that I'm interested in trying to harness and use some of those aesthetics to inform the way that I make sculpture.
Awesome. And I guess for the context of my work, I kind of had like a little click with Morgan when she mentioned like climate anxiety. And my work doesn't necessarily like kind of discuss climate anxiety, but it's more so just interpersonal anxiety that I have with other people and navigating the emotions that follow that. And my work is mostly based in my own personal narrative, whether it be like experiences I've had in the past or things that I like fantasize or hope for the future. And I guess for an example of that meeting is like the painting that's like in the front of the window. I forget it's called Water Under the Bridge. I often forget the name of my paintings. Yeah, that one.
Okay, great.
Because I have a lot of them, but but with this painting specifically, I was thinking about more so an experience of forgiving someone, but not forgetting. So having that raging feeling inside of you. So the grass kind of looks like it's fire, or like maybe it's about to turn on fire with the sun like burning it or scorching it. But then there's also like this blue and like white mystical fire that's around it. And I'm thinking that like the idea of like inner work, where like not necessarily self-care, but you like do work to like kind of undo the way you think about things like on your own without like a therapist or like a counselor. And I feel like that's like a practice, like a magical practice to me. It's kind of mystic. I also do tarot as well. So I think my interest in like magic and like fantasy and having superpowers, especially growing up watching so much TV, I think it's like all accumulated into me wishing my powers were real, and maybe my powers is inner work, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's great. I know I was privy to a lot of those conversations as you were installing and finding your way in the space, but also then finding your way with each other's work. So it's always very rewarding for each exhibition really, and how the artists come together and show their work together. So that's really wonderful. A lot of times the jurors will come to see the exhibitions, which of course we change every month. And so it's nice for them to see something that they, responded to in the jury process, then actually see it installed in the gallery. And that's very meaningful to them too. So I appreciate that. I'm kind of curious about how it is that you came to Roy. What made you want to exhibit at Roy, and where is Roy in your continuum of your career? What's next after Roy?
Roy has hosted several of my Columbus-based friends, and since Columbus is accessible to both me and Morgan, and we've seen some great work by our friends up there, we figured it was a smart move to participate with Roy if we could. And I think the Roy space is a really great space, so I think it all just worked out very well. So
yeah, absolutely. It's a big, beautiful space. For me, it's local. Padyn lives like a 7-hour drive away. So on our radar of places to try and show at, it was definitely something that made sense in that sense of just location, but also, seen a lot of really great shows here. A lot of people we know have shown here. it is a big, beautiful space. You can manipulate it a bit with the 2 movable walls. So every show is customizable in a different way. I think what's next, like I said, together, hopefully in the future, there will be things that are next for us, but separately, I have a solo show at GCAD. It's Granite City Art and Design District, just outside of St. Louis, opening in a month. And then I'm also in a 2-person exhibition with Marcia Mack at Skylab in June. So that's my like next couple of things. If you want to say yours, Padyn, sorry, I interrupted you.
No, you're fine. I cut off before I could. I also have a solo show at GCAD when Morgan's comes down. We're one after the next. And then I'm doing a residency in Montana for a month. And then, I graduate in late April, first and foremost, my MFA. So that's pretty exciting. And then I'm gonna, once I'm done with my residency, hang out with my family in Montana for a bit. And then hopefully by August or September, move on to my next thing. So I'm working on applications for those right now.
Awesome. Congratulations to both of you. That's both exciting equally.
Oh, thank you,
Thank you.
Phoenix.
For me, I guess I got to back up to like the Roy question. So what drew me to Roy is more so the location of it being in Ohio, because I haven't had an exhibition in Ohio in my home state since I was like in high school, and I don't know if high school art exhibitions count really. So I guess to say in my professional career, I've never showed in Ohio before. So I kind of jumped at the opportunity to kind of go back home. It's kind of a homecoming for me. And I've also was attracted to one of the jurors, and I really wanted her to see my work, and I assumed that she did. So that's also satisfying. And I was like, I was within like her radar to also include me in the jury exhibition. So that was really cool too. So 2 things that I was attracted to. And I guess at what's next after Roy for me, I have a solo exhibition at the Wright Museum of Art at Beloit College here in Wisconsin. It's like close to the border of like Wisconsin and Illinois. I'm doing that for like maybe a month or so. And then I have like a 2-person show at Portrait Society Gallery here in Milwaukee. And that's not until like next January. So I kind of left open a gap between those 2 shows because I need to make some more work. But other than that, that's what I'm up to currently.
Congratulations to you too.
Thank you.
That sounds great.
Oh, great. Yeah. Good things. I'm always curious about where Roy is on your journey. So I'm glad to know that it was a meaningful experience for you. It certainly was for us. We love hosting and seeing, what's next for our artists. So thank you for sharing that. I wanted to talk a little bit about your practice and what's integral to your practice, what's integral to your work. I'm sure in this, besides a pandemic, in our very busy world of other commitments and things like that, cats and whatnot. What is integral to you in the creative process and to your work specifically?
Should I kick that off? Okay.
Go ahead.
Honestly, what is integral? Well, my practice is mainly foam and cardboard armatures that I then manipulate the surfaces of. And so honestly, I think I just need a pretty constant influx of new language and new images around me. So trying to stay up on my research, trying to stay up on being a participant in my friends and family communities and also just my artistic communities. So I know kind of what's going on. I feel like social and cultural and pop cultural sort of influencers are really important to me so that I understand how these symbols are operating and where they come from and why they come from. For several years now, since I graduated my BFA, I've been working with different tangents of how queer identity intersects with cowboy masculinity and like the history of cowboy masculinity, but also how it's been taken over and just been re-perpetrated throughout our cultural society. So yeah, I guess I just need honestly, I just need a lot of time and space in the studio too. And that download time is really important. I've been busier this year than I've been in a long time. And so when in my off time outside of the studio, I understand how much that quiet and like physical presence to be in the studio is most important, but I also really need that download time to be looking at my environments. And so if I don't get outside the studio, I feel like that's when I start to get a little bit convoluted and things don't start feeling as clear as they could. So.
You go ahead, Phoenix.
Yeah. Peyton, I like the concept of download time. That's a good term for that, for like digesting things around you when you're not in the studio. I love that.
Yeah, it's necessary.
For me, my practice, it mostly entails me using like technology to make decisions on my painting. So a lot of my work looks like it has like brush strokes that are very stark and like jagged. Like, you know, they're kind of unnatural. I always say they're unnatural brush strokes because they don't occur really in nature without like the use of a computer program, at least for me. And I first started this practice of like using like Snapchat to like make decisions on my paintings a couple of years ago. But now I just kind of learned how to like make drawings with that language without using like those filters and things. But so every once in a while, I still use Procreate to make decisions as well. And I guess for I think I forgot the latter part of the question. My brain got a little fried. Would you mind restating it?
What's integral to your work? You know, how do you, and part of your practice, how do you find time to create? And what is your process for creating is also of interest. You know, do you sketch things out? Do you, work on something every day? Do you have multiple projects that you're working on at the same time? Do you hone in on one particular thing and then move on to the next? Those are always very interesting to get some insight into an artist and their practice.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I can totally answer that. So time-wise, about finding time to work in my studio, lately I've been struggling because I just started working full-time for the first time in my life. And I'm currently already in the process, a month or two into this job, I'm already in the process of trying to hire a studio manager because now I can afford to pay somebody to help me do things. But now I need help like finding the time to work. So I need someone else to do some of the grunt work that I would typically do if it wasn't for me working full time. But I guess that's something I'm negotiating right now with myself, is finding the time to make the work that I want to make. But I was in my studio last night, so I tend to go in at night. So when I'm not at work and on the weekends, because I think I use my days to like clean around the house and things. And I think I'm always researching when I'm scrolling on the internet as well. I just kind of similar to Peyton, just always constantly downloading things. I have a lot of folders on Instagram where I organize images that I like. And I also have a collage brain. So sometimes I'll access images that I've saved and like bring them back and like paint them subtly. But, you know, I obscure them enough so nobody notices, but that's the kind of the way I function. And that's,
Sorry, I was going to add on your idea of collage, but keep going.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, I think I answered all the questions. Okay, cool.
What were you going to say, Peyton?
Oh, I was just going to say that I always forget how much collage, and it doesn't necessarily have to mean paper to paper collage, how much collaged information really informs my practice. And I like to think back to like how many different environments can I pull from and why did they make it into the piece? So I think ultimately collage is one of the most important elements for me as well.
I absolutely agree. I like Phoenix said, I have like a few folders on Instagram that I'm like putting things in. To one of them is just about color palette. And I also collect a lot of language. I have this like really long list of potential titles for things that I've been doing since I started grad school, which was 2015. So it's a big list and it's something that I can just kind of go through and it can help me like formulate ideas. Or once I finish a piece, I'm like, what is this about? And I can just kind of pick something that fits with it. So that's a lot of reading, listening to podcasts, music, stuff like that. Right now in the studio, I am trying to take my work I am taking my work off the wall in a lot of ways. My previous work before I started making these woven portals was almost always sculptural. And this is the first big body of work that I've made that's pretty much completely relied on the wall, and being these like discrete wall objects, which has been really rewarding in a lot of ways because I've been able to show them a lot of places because they're really easy to ship. So this is actually the first time that they've all been in one place. So it's really exciting to see this work all together. But now I've started making these like woven portal pieces in the summer of 2020. So it's been a couple of years and now I'm like, okay, I need to go bigger. I need to go freestanding. I need to figure out how to take something that is kind of, flat in its nature back into sculpture. So that's what I'm working on in the studio now for my show that opens. Yesterday was 1 month. It opens March 26th and I'm like, it's really starting to put a fire under my butt. I'm like, ooh. But yeah, so that's where I'm at in the studio right now. For me, I get in the studio whenever I can, but I'm working at 2 different universities and I teach kids classes on Saturdays. So my schedule is really crazy. So yeah, it is kind of just getting in there whenever possible. And it's also when you don't have a lot of time or when you have a deadline coming up, it's easier to prioritize. I find that if I don't have a lot of time to hum and haw over things, I make faster decisions that are often better decisions because again, I'm not like overthinking it. So being busy can kind of be an asset for me. But yeah, everything is hand woven. So it's like a pretty time consuming process to needle and thread it. So yeah, that's what I have to say about that.
Yeah, but what I've seen you do in a month's time is insane. Like your 15-foot tall sculptures from your Prairie
That's
residency.
true.
You made 2, how tall were they? 15 feet?
11 and a half feet, but
Okay, well,
like
I'm
who's
gonna say
counting?
15. Yeah. So,
And
but
they were
shit,
woven portals as well. Yeah, that was crazy. That was a lot of work, but it was, yeah, really rewarding.
and they're gorgeous.
Thank you.
I also want to resonate that I also keep a color palette folder on Instagram. Mine is called Color Palette Composition and Texture Robbery. I just rob other people's textures and things and then use it for my work or like look at it for inspiration. I love that. I love that we do that. We both do that.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. I wonder how you make decisions about what it is that you exhibit. And in that continuum, how do you know when something is ready to exhibit? And then how do you know what you're going to exhibit? Some things might be dictated by space or by the theme of an exhibition. I understand that. But when you're making some decisions about where your work is going or color choices, we don't all have Padyn to be able to ask about those kinds of things. So do you get feedback from other people? Are you in critique groups? How does that process work?
For me, I have a curator brain. That's my full-time job. So I think I just do what a curator would and like put all the images like up physically, or like I put them on my phone in like a photo album and then just look at them together and move them around that way. And yeah, I don't really pay attention too much to narrative or meaning when I exhibit my work together because I feel like my works are very independent of one another in meetings, but when they come together in different like sort of sets or like organizational patterns and things, they kind of make up a new meeting every time they show. So I think I just have it a little lucky where I can just kind of pick and choose and just go based off of color rather than in meeting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for me, I'm pretty project based, and it can be challenging because sometimes I make a body of work and I show it and then I don't want to work like that anymore. I'm just over it. Or if I try to keep working like that, I'm forcing it and I'm putting too many constraints on it. And I'm like, well, this is how I work now. So this is how I have to make things. And it gets too tight. So I kind of move from thing to thing. And right now the portals, like these woven things, like that's kind of sticking and that's kind of being a through line in the last few years. Which is great because I feel like I'm building off something and I'm not reinventing the wheel every time. But yeah, I generally, I start working in a certain way and I kind of exhaust that. And then I allow it to evolve into something else. And sometimes, like right now, it's like, I have a show in a month, I'm making work for that show and it's all going to work together. And when I bring it there, I might edit some things out. It's always better to have more than you need, than feel like you don't have enough stuff. But then, and then in the future, that work might be morph into a new body of work, and some things come in and some things don't stay. I sometimes feel like I have to show new work every time I show, which is unrealistic. But it's, you know, this kind of fast-paced, fast fashion world we live in. So I think that that's something that, you know, sometimes you're just like, you know what, this can be shown twice. It's a different context and it's doing something else with what's surrounding it. And yeah, it's just kind of negotiating that with yourself.
Yeah, I think you and I have to constantly remind each other that almost nobody, not to be pejorative, but almost nobody has seen what we're doing.
Right.
So taking it from one gallery to the next, it's going to be a different audience every time, even though if we're going to post on our social media, hey, look, this piece is up, our social media audience has seen it, but the real audience hasn't. So that's where the like fast fashion of it all gets really annoying.
Totally. Yeah.
I think I'm similar to Morgan in the way that like I create in series a lot. I think I'm just very kind of tunnel vision, and when I get into a theme, and since I've been finding ways to manipulate my overall theme several different times over the years, or new ways to inform it, I have to take a step back when I do need to exhibit the work individually and kind of break it down. And separate from my own present themes in the work, I have to think like, what is this work doing overall, separate from my own subjectivity? And then that allows me to look at other submissions or other curatorial endeavors that I say, oh, I do think this works, even if I think it's too related to what I'm doing. Like these are the overall like equations that's happening, which is what I did with what we're doing at Roy right now. It's like, even though this is some of my thesis work, I saw that like the themes from our statement were present in there as an underlying tone, because what I did submit to Roy no longer exists. So then I had to like kind of, I didn't scramble, but I had to like figure out how to recontextualize the new stuff.
Mm-hmm.
If you wouldn't mind talking specifically, Padyn, about your work, and forgive me, I might not get the title correct. Patsy Cline, it's the blue ribbon. That has really resonated with people. I could have sold it 3 times. So
oh, damn.
Can you maybe talk a little bit about that specific piece and how you came to put that together?
Yeah, I was thinking about how I think a lot about the phrase utility glamour, and I don't know if that's something that I came up with or if that's just something that's been sticking with me. And I think a lot of times cowboy pageantry is a lot of utility glamour, where like it looks like you're supposed to utilize this workwear, but oftentimes it's bedazzled and rhinestoned or over functional in a way. And so that's kind of where I inform a lot of my work. And so like a bow is an accessory, a bow is a fascinator, a bow indicates sometimes a certain gender, a bow is technically supposed to be delicate, all of these things. And like, I think I was listening to a lot of Patsy Cline and listening to 3 cigarettes in an ashtray, and how this third party kind of came in and swept away her man, and like the like underlying symbol of the like lone cigarette burning itself out in the ashtray is, I think, really potent and really gorgeous. And so the like lipstick tipped cigarette at the bottom of the bow, I'm still figuring out what this relationship is between cigarette to bow, because I do think it is very like 1 + 1 now makes sculpture a little bit, where I just stuck that in there. But for anybody that hasn't seen the surface, it's a like satin surface, but there's cracks all over it. And so I think I'm just really trying to break down some of the like delicate, but also rigid boundaries that exist between some of the things that we expect, in the way that like that boundary between utility and glamour sometimes is very blurred. So I hope that helps.
Thank you. That does help. It's good to have that kind of context, especially when I'm chatting with people about the work when they come in to visit the exhibition.
Yeah.
Today we had a group in who took advantage of the Roy zines that we have here that the interns put together when they had asked you some specific questions about your work, and any kind of conversation like that that gives people a little more insight into the work makes it a more meaningful experience. So I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, I think we can all relate to any of those symbols, of course. There have been some really interesting conversations in the gallery about the works themselves and the colors and the structures. And I know Morgan had shared at one point that some of the work is like, what is it in the background for Photoshop, Morgan? Is that right? The gray and white squares?
Oh yeah, these two pieces, this piece and this piece are both. I was thinking about, the transparent Photoshop background, which is why, yeah, it's, that's what it is.
Yeah, very relatable. I think we're all sort of just looking for connections when we come into the gallery. I know I've said this before in conversations, but honestly, when people come into the space, they just take a deep breath because they know that they're in a space where there's something going to be interesting or beautiful or intriguing or any of those things, all of those things. And they've gotten out of their four walls for a moment. And so they're just having a wonderful experience in the gallery. And so I appreciate and thank you very much for continuing to find time and space to create, because it really is very needed now more than ever, I would say. So you talked a little bit about Instagram and, collecting some inspirational work and things like that. Are there particular artists that each of you follow or that inspire you?
Yeah, I think a constant of mine, Alex DeCorta, he is a video installation, collage, just kind of all of the things. He's very tapped into pop culture and celebrity culture and symbols and objects. I look at Rachel Harrison a lot. She's a sculptor as well. Right now, I've been informing some of the ways that I use a little bit of surreal imagery from Magritte's work. I think his broken down and really simplistic form of surrealism is what I'm really interested in. I think his layering is really nice, and I use that to kind of inform some of my compositions.
Yeah, Magritte, Rachel Harrison, for sure. It's funny because there's definitely a handful of people that I'm really paying attention to on Instagram right now, but because it's just me looking at it, I can think of their screen, their Instagram name, but I can't think of their actual name. There is a ceramic, furniture kind of person named, oh goodness, her Instagram is smile, and I can't remember her name. What is it?
Katie Stout.
Yes, Katie Stout. Thank you. And I'm just looking at her work a lot while I'm figuring out how to take these portals off the wall, and using this kind of more ceramic kind of language with the Magic Sculpt, which is the 2-part epoxy clay that I use on these wall pieces. Yeah, I think Peyton and we send each other a lot of things on Instagram too. When we see different things that we're excited about. Can't think of anybody else specifically, but lots of looking all the time.
It's really hard to be constantly tapped into Instagram, especially with the influx of how much we see. And so I try to be conscious of saving and only peeking when I really need to, because my scroll is pretty much just all artists right now. So then I have to think how many of their decisions are going to be influenced and put into my practice, Mm-hmm. So I do try to keep a gallery and a little file in my Instagram that is the things that I think are the most potent that I'm looking at.
Yeah. Let's see. I'm trying to think of artists. A lot of the artists that I look at on Instagram, they all are inactive, but I follow them anyway. And the artist that I follow the most, not follows, but find myself looking at their profiles the most is Nina Chanel Abney. She, she's famous. I really like her graphic quality of her work, and she kind of makes me feel like, oh, I can also like do graphic sort of paintings without having to worry about blending colors together. So that was refreshing when I first came across her work. I also like the work of Geneva Ellis. And I really like her paintings, and she is like super cryptic and like can't find her anywhere on the internet. She doesn't do interviews or anything. Her paintings just float around on the internet, and then she shows up like in exhibitions. So I mean, good for her that she's kind of off the grid, but I really like her paintings and how surreal they are. And one artist I do follow that's active on the internet is Sydney Jimenez. Like, she's a sculptor, and she creates like these life-size like sculptures of like people of color, and they all have like cool clothes. It looks very Gen Z, and I think that's why I'm drawn to it, because all the clothing is very contemporary and they look like people that I hang out with myself. So her work excites me. So sometimes I do take inspiration from sculptors and the way that they use color and how they paint things in the round, because I think at heart I do have like a sculptor's brain of just constructing canvases. Everything on my work is kind of like jagged or like cut out oddly or like kind of sewn together, like not brashly, but it's just kind of there. But yeah,
you collage paintings the way that some people like build wooden structures.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Mm-hmm.
Forgive me, I don't even know what time it is. I've enjoyed our conversation very much. I want to open it up if anyone has questions that they want to post in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and ask questions. Artists, do you have questions for each other? Maybe something you want to talk about that I haven't covered yet?
I don't have any, unfortunately.
Yeah, I was getting ready to say it. We spent like 5-6 hours together. I think we got to know each other very well.
Right.
I wouldn't mind asking a question to the artists, if that's okay.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Can you all hear me fine?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So just for you all's experience, again, as artists, what have been some of the most challenging obstacles that you've experienced in regards to maybe getting yourself out there, getting showcased, and making a bigger name for yourself? What are some of the biggest obstacles that you all have ran into?
Oh, I'm ready. Can I go first?
Yeah, of course.
I'm like, I got a lot to say about this. No, I have, I really think that making art is an act of bravery, even before showing it. Just making it is an act of bravery, allowing yourself to trust the process, or trust yourself that you're not going to make something bad. I had a really slow start when I finished undergrad. I was kind of afraid of making bad art, and so I didn't make a lot of art. And when I did make art, it was a little bit tighter. And I'm constantly battling putting myself in that kind of box again, where I create too many tight parameters, and I have to let myself play. But I think trusting yourself, and this kind of self-confidence that you can't just wake up and say, I'm going to feel it today. You kind of have to just keep the grind going until it starts to feel good, talking to other people, showing up places, and having somebody like Padyn that you can be like, does this look like shit? And be really real about it. And then once you kind of get the ball rolling, it gets easier, because, as you're applying for things, you've written 10 different applications for that body of work. So, you're not just recycling the same stuff, but you have stuff to build off of. And then every time you do something, you're like, oh, my writing's even better, or my, the next piece is like even more potent. I think it's just getting over that hump of being brave in the studio, even by yourself. Sketchbooks can be hard for me. I'm like too precious with them. So I think that that's something that, just finding the way that you can be brave is my best answer.
I resonate with that, Morgan, because I do agree. It does get easier once you figure it out and things just kind of fall into place and opportunities just start to kind of come on their own without you having to like go out there and seek it like some crazed like mother bear trying to search for food. Like that's a weird like image I'm describing, but that's what it felt like for me at the very beginning, at least while I was like still in undergrad looking for things to do. But I would say the challenge that I face the most when like getting out there and doing work is just keeping up with demand, because I think I don't make work fast enough and I'm a very slow painter. Like I'll maybe do like a part of the painting maybe 1 week and then not come back for like a month and work on it again. So I'm trying to find like the correct workflow where I'm like making enough work and I'm not burning myself out, but then I'm also keeping up with demand and people aren't just buying all my work up and I don't have anything to show. That's kind of the position that I'm in. I could just say, don't buy my work, leave me alone, not for sale, because I can't keep up. But also, I guess trying to like, I don't know, I kind of feel that fire under my ass, kind of like Morgan at the same time, trying to make enough work. So that's the challenge I'm facing, time and making enough work.
I mean, that's all great stuff to build off of. My only thing is that I would say I had to learn how to be as present with what I do as possible, and understanding how much of what I do outside of the studio also will trickle itself into the studio, to be very aware of my habits and how much crossover and communication I have in my own life, so that I understand that what I'm making is as honest as possible and authentic to what I want to do, so that like I don't second guess myself and say, well, that's not the type of maker you want to be, or that why are you making something like this? Because I can look at several different factors in my life and say, oh, well, these themes pop up everywhere. So of course this is authentic. Don't let someone else or let Instagram make you feel like you should be making a different type of work. And I also have had to be really honest with my way of working and with my schedule of like, I can only apply to things when I feel they're as like applicable to me as possible, because I don't like to take that much time from the studio. I would rather be busting as many days and nights as I can before I start applying to things. But like Morgan said, the amount of writing that you do just starts to accumulate. So like I just turned in an application the other day that I completely had all of the materials ready to go. I just needed to like reformulate it based on other writings that I had. So it made the application process that much easier. And so I think just compiling everything that you have makes it start to go smoother, you know?
Thank you all for that. And do you all feel that you have to have a solid body of work first before pushing that out there, or do you look for maybe, I don't know, I guess exhibitions that are kind of speaking to a topic that you can relate to, and then you create based off of the intent to submit it there?
I never do intent to submit. I usually submit what I have, because then I am somebody that's pretty easily influenced by outside forces in that way. So then I'd be like, okay, well, this curatorial statement makes it so that I need to make this decision, and I don't want to do that. If I can find ways to manipulate my own work into their curatorial, I'll try to do that as much as possible.
Yeah, I think finding things to apply to, if there's an open call for a group show and it has a theme and you're like, oh, I think some of my work can fit into that theme, then I'll apply for it. But generally when it is a situation where it's something like this, where it's an open call and you are applying with, it's not thematic. It's like apply to have a show, and show your work. Like Padyn said, the work that we submitted, a lot of the work in here is the work I submitted, but for him, a lot of that work doesn't exist anymore. And so figuring out in your language around it, how you're saying like, this work is, related to what I'm going to do, or this is something specific I'm going to do. And here's some documentation of previous stuff to like show you that I know what I'm doing and it's going to be great. But yeah, I feel like there's a certain amount of just kind of having a good pitch. And then if the work's made, great. And if you haven't made the work yet and you sold something that you got to figure out how to do it, then, you get that great deadline pressure under your butt.
I love that. For me, it's very similar. I think we're all having the same kind of thought here where we're like, we just make the work. And if we happen to come across an opportunity that kind of fits like our practice and it is like the least amount of energy we can spend applying as possible based on things we have applied on in the past, then it's worth pursuing. And I also just try to keep meditating that opportunities aren't like a finite resource, they come back around. So even if like I don't feel prepared for something, like at this moment I can wait for the open call to come back around and like, you know, say like in a month if it's a monthly thing, or next year, you know, it's kind of like not at the end of the world. And also I get to rest when I'm not applying to things. So I mean, it's not entirely awful when things, you know, things that are meant for you don't pass you by. So I don't know, I try to keep a positive outlook.
Thank you all.
How do you make time for the business of arts? I mean, a lot of what you're doing, of course, creating, but you also need to document your work. You need to be, you know, getting photos of it, but also tracking it somehow so that you know what your inventory is and where it is, what you're applying for, how you're tracking that kind of information. Do you trade for those kinds of things? And you have a friend who's really into the business of arts? And can
Morgan,
help
you're
you
gonna
with
have
that?
to move. Sorry, Lynette. Lots of feedback. Okay, well, the business of art, honestly, I don't sell that much work, and so I guess it's not about selling. It is about all the upkeep and the organization to be an artist, I think. I usually do big spurts of things where I make, and then do a big documentation day. It's hard for me to like do things along the way, like make a sculpture document, because documenting it is always a process that's at least 4 or 5 times longer than you expect it to be. So I stockpile a lot, and I usually in other forms stockpile as well. Like I will find 3 deadlines that I'm really interested in, and they're all probably about a month or a couple of weeks apart, and then I will try to do all of those together at the same time, and I will like just kind of stockpile everything that I do so that I feel like I can rationalize that deadline also isn't just a singular deadline. There's 3 other things that acquire my attention, so if I can sit down, I'm going to be knocking out as much as possible. And so taking that time away from the studio, which sometimes feels a little bit violent on my end because I hate leaving the studio, at least feels worth it in that way.
Yeah, I do this thing I like to call productive procrastination, which is when I have other things in life that I really don't want to do, I will update my website or update my CV or something, which is like things that most people hate doing. But for me, I'm like, I'm really accomplishing something here when really I don't necessarily need to do it in that moment. So that's actually kind of a helpful practice. But yeah, I have like tabs on my, not tabs that I keep open, but like bookmark folders. And for, you know, for applying to things, I have like a current submissions one, and I order everything in it in the order that it's due. And if once I apply for it, or once I miss the deadline, you know, depending on what's going on in life, I'll put it at the bottom, or I'll delete it if it's, you know, if I know it's going to come up again next year, whatever. But because with this body of work specifically, I was showing it a lot. I actually got 2 pieces back the week before we installed, because they were one was in Tennessee and one was in Troy, New York. And so this is the first time that I had enough discrete smaller works that I could really ship out easily, that I did actually have to keep track of where things were and when I was going to get them back. And I missed a couple deadlines because I was like, oh, if I apply for the show, I'm actually not going to have any work at that time because they're all going to be other places. So spreadsheets become your friend, but yeah, it's been a learning curve for that for me, but a good one. Yeah.
110% agree, especially on the spreadsheets thing. My whole studio runs on like a big spreadsheet. But I think I kind of answered this question earlier where I was saying I was having a hard time keeping up with like that office kind of grunt work things and trying to like contract somebody else to do it for me, because I I think one of my weak points is just communication. So like keeping up with emails, like even though I see an email in my mailbox and it's like a good thing, or somebody's just responding to a question that I had, sometimes I feel like a little bit of dread responding just because of the emotional energy I have to put into the reply is a lot. And that's like labor in itself. So I'm like, it shouldn't feel this way. It shouldn't hurt to like run my business. So I should, it's probably about that time to hire someone to help me. But yeah, so yeah, I'm drowning. So I'm trying to fix the drowning currently.
A gift and a curse.
Exactly. Gift and a curse.
You need to find some great interns like we have here at Roy. Let me know. We can maybe scout for you or something.
Well, they would have to be based in Milwaukee.
Yeah, well, we know some people in Milwaukee, I think. We
Okay.
actually just started to reach out across the country to see who else is doing the same sorts of things that Roy is. So we've identified other organizations in different states that are also working with emerging artists, thinking that we'll be able to network in some way, or perhaps exchange best practices or something like that. So yeah, very exciting to see that other people are doing what we're doing.
Cool.
Okay, well, in the interest of everyone's time and thinking about you getting back into the studio to make some art, I thank you very much for your attention today. And thank you to those who came on Zoom and shared this experience with the artists. We are going to wrap up for today. The exhibition closes on Friday. Excuse me. More information can be found on our website. We have a blog there, the artist statements, some questions that we've asked the artists to talk a little bit more about their work, so you can gain some insight into that. And our gallery hours are Wednesday to Sunday, 12 to 6, so stop by if you can. I look forward to seeing everybody at the end of the week. I can't believe it's almost time for the show to be over. Oh my gosh. But thank you very much for sharing today your practices and your insights. It was really wonderful to have this talk with you. All right,
Thank you
thank
very
you
much.
all.
Yeah,
Thanks,
you.
Back to the
Morgan. Thanks,
studio.
Phoenix.
Yeah, see ya.